Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Navigating SBIR Grants. My name is Colin Mahan. I'm a Director of Programs at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. At the center, we celebrate Black entrepreneurs every day, but please join us in celebrating Black Business Month in August as well. As you may have just seen in the chat, the NASDAQ Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using that link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Quick housekeeping item, we're going to open up for live Q&A near the end of the event, so please submit those questions for us in the bottom of your screen and the Q&A function throughout the presentation. We'll try to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, BPM, HubSpot, and California Community Colleges. We're grateful and humbled by their contributions. During these still, in so many ways, unique times, we are curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs we work with. So I'm going to start us off by just taking a quick poll to let us know, how are you feeling about your business right now? We are nearing the end of the year. 2022 has been blowing by. So how are you doing? We use this information to understand the wellness for entrepreneurs, courses that we should be providing. We know it's a lonely journey and we are here to support. Alrighty, I'm gonna end this poll, share those results to just show you all where you're at. Looks like optimism is in the lead, but there is a little bit of survival mode and anxiety out there. So hopefully the information that you learned today will help with some of those sentiments. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guest. Chuck Eason is a SBIR specialist from the Tech Futures Group and partner at the center. Hey, Chuck.
Hi, good to see you.
Looking forward to this. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm glad to see the majority of people are optimistic about their business. That's great. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to share a little bit about the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which I'm a big fan of. It's something I've been involved with for about 25 years now. And let me share my screen to get this started here. Okay. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And it's something I've been doing for many years. But before I jump into the presentation, I wanted to share with you just one slide about Tech Futures Group. So I'm the SBR specialist with Tech Futures Group, and that's part of the NorCal Small Business Development Center network. So we're essentially a nonprofit that we're funded through, on the federal level, the Small Business Administration, and then also through the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So the way we operate is we provide free one-on-one counseling services and training. We don't take any equity or cash. And I'm also the SBR specialist for the Silicon Valley SBDC, which is part of the NorCal SBDC as well. So I do work for both the Tech Futures Group, which covers all pretty much Northern California, and then the Silicon Valley SBDC. A little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I've been doing this with SBR since actually 1995. I was first exposed to it. I was running a business incubator down in Southern California. It was part of the Inland Empire Small Business Development Center right at Norton Air Force Base, which had closed down. I worked in the aerospace industry for many years. And after the base closed down, they want to get things going again. And it's kind of a ghost town. So I helped write the business plan to get the incubator going. But our very first tenant in the incubator there was a bright guy from Caltech. He also worked at TRW, where I worked at there on the base. And he had just secured what's called a phase 1 grant. I'll talk about the different phases in a minute. Through the Army White Sands test range to develop this software when you shoot down a missile or plane, kind of the free fly zone for that. And at the time, I think he had 2 or 3 part-time people himself, and he was our first tenant in the incubator. And then once he moved in, I helped him write his phase 2 grant application, which he was successful in getting. And then he became our first graduate out of the incubator. Went on to win multiple SBR awards, grew his company to about 90 employees and offices around the world. So that was my first exposure to it back in 1995. And then I moved up here in 1997 to take the job as the director of the Napa Valley College SBDC. Continued to do training and counseling around small business innovation research. I remember when I first got up here, the very first training I did was a 2.5-day proposal writing workshop, where we had the first day in how to prepare a proposal, and then a cost proposal, and then we had representatives from UC Berkeley and UC Davis to talk about IP. And I remember we had a couple that attended the training that were working at Day Laboratories in Napa, and they had developed this patch you put on your skin, and it changes color with detecting alcohol levels. So it had law enforcement applications and other applications as well. And after taking our training, we were successful in securing a $110,000 NIH phase 1 grant, went on to get a $750,000 phase 2 grant, and they quit their jobs, launched their company. So I've seen this over and over again, where the small companies, 1 to 5 employees typically is kind of our client that we look at, use this funding to demonstrate the feasibility of some new innovation or technology, and then launch their companies with it. So it's a great source of non-dilutive funding. And I've been helping clients over the 20 years, and I got the itch myself to do this. So I've actually been through the process, and I secured a NSF, National Science Foundation, phase 1 and phase 2 grant. The technology that I was working on was called ShapeMaker. We were doing basically 3D printing of houses. So we could take any 3D model and then print something the size of a house. You can see here's a 3D model of this Buddha, and there's a 25-foot tall model that we built out of layers of foam cut with a 4-axis water jet. And you can see Dr. Thomas down standing next to that. That's to give you a scale of it. He was our PI from the university we were working with. Now, there's not a real big market for 25-foot tall Buddhas, but 2 of these. One of them is actually down in Santa Cruz, spray painted gold in the temple down there. But my concept was to take this and apply it to the construction industry. So actually do 3D printing of houses or other structures. So in phase 1, we did a 1/12 scale model of my house here in Green Valley, did a full scale curved staircase. And then in phase 2, we built a full scale structure. And you can see me in the mechanical engineering lab there. So we call these tech blocks, kind of think of like giant Lego blocks that we build in the factory and ship out on site to build a structure. So that was a project I was involved with. So I've been through the process myself, and you learn a lot just by doing it as well. I think I've been doing counseling and training for many years, but it's helpful to go through the process. So a little bit about the program. The SBIR program has been around since the 80s, and the purpose of it is basically to tap into the expertise of small businesses to help, develop new innovations to support different federal agency needs. So a lot of times I think small businesses can be much more innovative than maybe large businesses. So this program is basically set aside for small businesses. One thing I always like to say, when I was the Small Business Development Center director for both Napa Valley College and Solano College for about 10 years, we'd have people walking in asking, are there grants for small businesses? And we kind of qualify that and say, it's very difficult to get a grant if you're a for-profit small business. If you're like a 501c3 nonprofit, you might be able to go after foundation grants and other things. But what I like about the SBIR program, it's an exception to that rule, in that you actually have to be a for-profit small business to be eligible to go after it. So think of it as kind of a set aside for small businesses. And kind of the purpose of it too is to commercialize technology. So it's to fund cutting edge technology. A lot of you have probably seen different versions of this Valley of Death chart. And you see here, you have this federally funded research on the left side, and then how do you get across this chasm to actually commercialize that into a product? So the SBIR funding can help you get across, or at least partway across that chasm. And I like this quote here. It says, research is the transformation of money into knowledge, and innovation is the transformation of knowledge into money. The other great thing about the SBR program is that even though the federal government is funding your R&D work, you retain worldwide patent rights to whatever you're developing. Now they do have a non-transferable right to use that, but a lot of people worry about, is the government going to take this from me or something? But they could potentially, like say in an emergency, they have what they call march-in rights if they need it for national defense, and you fail to commercialize it, they could force you to commercialize it or someone else to commercialize if there's a need. But I've never seen a problem with the government, taking their IP. And as far as the IP being protected, they just recently, last 2 years here now, require that the agencies have to keep the information confidential for 20 years after you complete your phase 1 or phase 2 grant. So they can't release the information. So just filing a SBR application isn't a disclosure like for IP or patent purposes. The only thing I've seen too, there are potentially a FOIA or Freedom of Information Act requests. I had one actually on my phase 2, like 10 years after I did it. But NSF, the agency, sent me my proposal and asked me to go through it again, asked me to confirm what sections were proprietary or confidential for that FOIA request. So there's 11 agencies that participate in the program. And you see here, there's both the SBIR and STTR, and I'll go over the differences between those two programs in a minute. So the larger agencies that have over $1 billion in annual R&D have to participate in both the programs, like the DoD, Health and Human Services, NASA, DOE, and NSF. And then the smaller agencies that have over $100 million in extramural R&D have to participate just in the SBR program. So those are the smaller ones like EPA and Department of Education. So each year, Congress requires them to set aside 3.2% of their extramural budget for SBIR and 0.45% for STTR. So it works out to about $3.7 billion that's available every year. California gets a good lion's share of that. We have about 1/5 of the awards. I think there's about 500 some phase 1s typically each year here in California. One thing I like to always show is this pie chart, kind of showing where does that $3 billion go. So of course the Department of Defense has the largest R&D budget. So when you multiply that times 3.2, they have the largest SBIR budget as well. And then NIH has another quarter of the pie. So between those two agencies, they have 3/4 of the pie. And then that last quarter of the pie are the Department of Energy, NASA, NSF, and then the small slivers are the small ones like Department of Education and EPA. So when you're searching for opportunities or grant opportunities, it's good to know where the money is. I usually suggest searching all the agencies, including like DoD funds all sorts of stuff, even like health related. They fund breast cancer research. DoD has the VA hospitals. My wife worked in research in VA for many years. And then they have hospitals. I'm up here by Travis Air Force Base, and they have David Grant Medical Center, which is a full-size hospital, right on the base too. So they fund medical things. But it's good to search all the agencies, and I'll be talking a little bit about how you do that search and find those funding opportunities. The other thing I like to point out here is what they call granting agencies and contracting agencies. So you see the green ones here are what they call granting agencies. So in both cases, you get the money from the government, and even if you fail, you don't have to pay it back. So in that sense, it's both, a grant, since you don't have to pay it back. But they just use a different mechanism. Some use grants, some use contracts. So the contracting agencies like the Department of Defense and NASA, when you look at their topics, they're very specific. They propose the problem, and then you propose the solution. So if it's the DoD, like a fuel cell for a soldier in the field, they'll tell you the exact specifications. They'll tell you the power requirements, the weight requirements, the cycle time, and they'll tell you exactly what they want you to do in a phase 1 grant, whether it's a benchtop prototype. So they're very specific typically. Now they do have some open topics as well in the last couple of years, but in general, they have specific topics. They propose a problem, you propose a solution. But the granting agencies, the ones in green, like NSF, NIH, they have very broad topics. So you just have to fit under one of their topic areas. And I kind of like working with the granting agencies. Sometimes it's a little easier to find a fit to go under. So you get to propose both the problem and the solution, as long as it's in one of their general topic areas that they're interested in funding. Another difference between the granting and contracting agencies to keep in mind when you're going after these is that the granting agencies aren't going to buy anything from you in general. They'll fund your phase 1 and phase 2 R&D efforts. They're not going to buy anything from you. But the contracting agencies, if you solve their problem in phase 1, phase 2, the DoD or NASA could potentially become what's called your phase 3 customer, where the SBIR legislation actually allows them to do a sole source contract. So they don't have to go out to bid. They can do that sole source contract, and they can't use SBIR dollars. It's a different pot of money they have to use, but that's what's called phase 3, and they could be your customer. So that's something to keep in mind when you're searching and trying to find topics that you want to go after. And maybe they can become your potential customer. Another kind of difference between the granting and contracting agencies is how they review the proposals. Granting agencies typically use an external review panel. You have maybe 3 or 4 people that they're going to pull together, and it takes them a long time to do that. It's like once you submit the proposal, it's like a 6-month process. They have to pull together a review panel, do the external review, then internal review. So that's one of the big downsides of the program. I'm a big fan of it. You can get up to $2 million in non-dilutive funding. But the downside, it's a government program, and how long it takes them to review these and get funding. So if you submit in June, like to NSF or something, you wouldn't hear back till end of November, and there's like a month due diligence period after that. So it's kind of a slow process. But the contracting agencies, I believe they're required by law to give you an answer within 90 days, and they can move a little bit faster because they usually have internal reviewers. So it's going to be like the DoD, it could be civil service people, or it could be Air Force people, or Army or Navy, or whoever it is, reviewing that. Whoever might be working on that weapon system or that technology will be the ones reviewing it. So they can move a little bit faster in doing that review process. So that's some of the differences between the granting and contracting agencies to keep in mind. So as I mentioned before, to be eligible to participate, you do have to be a for-profit small business, and you have to be a majority owned by a U.S. citizen or permanent resident alien. Or now with the reauthorization 6 years ago, they do allow venture capital ownership. That was kind of an issue mainly with NIH too. So now you could have VC ownership as long as there's not one owning more than 50%. So for-profit and then majority owned. And the other thing is you have to be a small business, which the SBA defines as under 500 employees, which is very large actually. And the majority of the clients we work with, they're under 10 employees. Most of them are probably that 1 to 5 range, I would say. Another eligibility requirement is the PI, which is the principal investigator. That's the person that's primarily responsible for managing the R&D project. Their primary employment has to be with the small business at the time of award and during the project. So that can be challenging to find someone to be a PI that's willing to say, quit their job to go work on a phase 1 grant when you can only have funding for a couple part-time people. Phase 2, you can fund people maybe full-time, but there's no guarantee that you're gonna get that phase 2. So that principal investigator is typically a lot of times for these small businesses, it's going to be the CEO or CTO, one of the founders that's already working in the business. And they define employment on a 40-hour week. So you can't work more than 49%, which is like 19.6 hours somewhere else. So when I was applying for my NSF phase 1 grant, I was working full-time as the director of the Small Business Development Center here at the college. And I remember I was up to midnight, putting the proposal together. And then once I submitted it, I had to wait that 5 or 6 months to find out whether it was funded. And once I was awarded the fund, then I had to negotiate with the college to drop down to part-time to be PI on the project. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going after this. You're going to have to either find someone on your team to be a PI or find someone that's willing to be primarily employed with you and not work over 19.6 hours somewhere else. Another thing is, since this is taxpayer dollars, they want to see that the R&D is done here in the U.S. There's some sections of that rule. I had a client here in Vallejo that was doing an NIH grant. They were developing a heart medication based on a snake venom. So they had a university in South America that had a lot of expertise, so they were able to get approval from the agency to subcontract some of the work out down there. But you do have to have approval for it. So in general, you need to make sure you're doing the work here in the United States. I always like to show this chart just to show who's getting these awards. You see here that the majority of them are under the 20 employees. The sweet spot, I'd say, is probably that 2, 3, 4, 5 employees that we see. I've had a few that are one person, but generally we have a team of 2 to 3 people, some founders, and then a lot of times these are new. They go to new companies that just started up, and they're 1/3 of them are first-time awardees. So it's not a rigged program necessarily. You may have, I don't know if you've heard in the news too, but the SBR program is going through reauthorization now. It expires September 30th. It was reauthorized 6 years ago. And one of the issues was around what they call SBIR mills, where companies were getting 20 or 30 phase 1 grants, some phase 2 grants, and they never commercialized anything. So the last reauthorization, they put in some transition milestones. You have to show that you're making, from so many phase 1s to phase 2s to commercialization. Otherwise, you're not going to be eligible to continue in the program. But a lot of them are first-time awardees. But yeah, that's another issue they're still dealing with the reauthorization. I know last time around, they ended up doing a bunch of continuing resolutions every 6 months to keep it funded. I'm not sure what's going to happen here after October 1st. Some of the agencies are going to just continue funding it with internal funds, I hear, as well. So how do they dole out the $3 billion every year? It's a 3-phase program. So phase 1 is what they call a feasibility stage. So you're demonstrating feasibility of innovation X to do Y. And that could be a simulation, it could be a study, it could be a benchtop prototype. And that's typically, depending on the agency, up to $275,000. Each one of these 11 agencies has their own different budgets, so they're all different. And it's usually a 6 to 12 month effort for that phase 1 effort. And then STTR, which I'll talk about in a minute, is a 12-month award typically. So it's all around demonstrating feasibility in phase 1. And then phase 2 is where the real money's at. So that's where you continue the R&D from phase 1. So maybe you did a benchtop prototype in phase 1, and then in phase 2, maybe you do a field prototype. So depending on the agency, if it's the Department of Education, the field would be testing it in the classroom. If it's a USDA, it might be testing it in the agricultural fields, literally in the fields. If it's a DOD, it might be with a warfighter. And the phase 2 grants are 2 years. And again, depending on the agency, it's up to about $1.8 million for NIH. NSF is $1 million. They all have their different budgets, so you have to look at each one of them. And then phase 3 is commercialization. And again, there's no direct SBIR funds in this. So this is where agencies like the DOD I mentioned, or NASA or someone, they can actually contract with you, do a sole source contract for whatever your technology is. A lot of times, like the DOD likes to see it's a dual use application, so you've solved their problem. Plus, there's also other commercial uses for it, so they're not the only ones investing in the technology. So I mentioned the 2 programs, SBIR, which stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR, which stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. So STTR is a smaller sister program. It's only in the few $100 million range versus there's about $3 billion through SBIR. The main difference here is that for SBIR, you as the small business have to do a minimum 2/3 of the work in phase 1 or 50% in phase 2. So you can subcontract out up to 1/3 of it. Also, the principal investigator has to be primarily employed with the small business for SBIR. For STTR, they require you to partner with a research institution. That could be like a research university or a federal lab. And you have to subcontract out a minimum 30%. So you as a small business have to do a minimum 40. You have to subcontract with a research institution for 30%. And then the other 30%, you could either keep your company or you could subcontract it out as well. And research institutions, that could be UC Berkeley, UCSF, or whatever, or university, or it could be The federal labs, there's certain ones that qualify. They have what they call GOGOs and GOCOs. So GOGOs are government-owned, government-operated, and GOCOs are government-owned, contract-operated. Like, it might be UC System managing Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories or Sandy or someone. So the GOCOs typically qualify. GOGOs may not qualify for research institutions. And the awards always go to you as a small business. So you're doing a subcontract with either the university or the federal lab, but the money goes to you and then you subcontract with them. So odds of being funded for phase one, it's pretty standard across agencies. So it's anywhere from about 1 in 8 to 1 out of 12. So average, about 1 in 10. I think NSF said they're around 1 in 8 right now. They're trying to get down a little bit below that. Again, many are first-time proposers. So it's fairly competitive. Our goal is to increase those odds from 1 in 8 to maybe 1 or 2, 1 in 3 to working with you. And then once you have a phase one grant, about 1 in 2 to 1 in 3 go on to phase two funding. So that's pretty good. Now you have to keep in mind that, of course, the competition's stiffer because you're competing against other people who already have phase one awards. And then phase three, you don't have really good statistics on that, but I've seen things like 1 in 20, which isn't very good. That's like only 5%. So that's where the program kind of falls down, and that's where we try to help out through Tech Futures Group and SBDC. How do you, make that transition to actually commercializing the technology as well? So the first step in the process to getting SBIR funding is to find a topic to fit under. So you can't just propose your own topic out of the blue. So you need to look and see. Each agency does a solicitation between 1 to 3 times a year. This chart shows the different time frames. So like NIH, for example, they have what's called an Omnibus Solicitation. It's due January 5th, April 5th, and September 5th. NSF is now 3 times a year in February, June, and then October. And they used to be twice a year. Last year, they were 4 times a year. Now they're 3 times a year. DOD is 3 times a year. And then the small ones, again, you see like Department of Education once a year or EPA once a year. So you only have that opportunity once a year to submit a proposal with them. So the bigger agencies generally do more often than the small agencies, maybe once a year. So that's the first step, is identifying a topic to fit under. And there's a couple ways to do that. So one way, you can go to SBIR.gov. This is the official SBA funded website. I'm not going to go to the website, but this is what it looks like if you click under funding, the tab at the top up here. They used to have on the homepage, so you can do a keyword search of all 11 agencies. So you can select, just DOD or DOE, but you can search all of them if you wanted to. And then you can search what's called open topics, future, or closed. So open are the ones that are currently on the street accepting applications. So that last chart I was showing you with the green bars of when they have the solicitation. So if they had released it in there, it's usually like a 2 or 3 month period that you have to then submit the proposal. So if you were to do a search for, say, like fuel cells, you might come up with 10 hits under open. And then if you click on close, you might get 100 hits. So I suggest searching both open and closed. As you can see, what did they fund last year? And the topics don't change too much from one solicitation or round to the next. So if you're not in an open solicitation, you can anticipate that the same topic might be on the next one, particularly for the granting agencies. The contract agencies, it might change a little bit more. But if you do the search here, the keyword, it'll pop up with a list, and then you can click on the title of any of them, and it'll give you more detail about what they're looking for, for phase one and phase two. So that's one way that you can basically do a search. A second way is you can go directly to any of the agency's SBIR pages. There's a link on sbir.gov with each one of the agencies, 11. Or if you just Google, if you do, this is an example for NSF, you just do NSF SBIR, the first thing that's going to pop up under Google will probably be their SBR page, and they call it America's Seed Fund. So as I mentioned, the granting agencies have these very broad topics. So these are the 30 topic areas that NSF has. So they have advanced analytics, advanced manufacturing. That's what I submitted mine under. And if you click on any of these, it would give you there's subtopics, and mine was under AM1, which is additive manufacturing. But they have advanced materials, AI, machine learning, virtual reality, there's biotechnologies, biomedical technologies, Internet of Things. So these are the areas that they're interested in funding. So as long as you can fit under one of these areas, then they're interested in taking a look at what you might have. So that's the kind of the second, that first step is to find the topic to fit under. The second step in the process is to contact the point of contact for that topic area. NSF calls them program directors. DoD calls them TPOCs, technical point of contact. NIH has, for their Omnibus Solicitation, it's like I think like a 200-page document, because NIH has 27 institutes and centers within it, so it's a little more difficult to search, but they have the topics for all 27 institutes in there. And at the end of each section, they give you the phone number and email for that particular area. So you can reach out to them, and you want to explain to them, what are you proposing to do? And is it a good fit for, what they're looking to fund? And another difference I didn't mention between the contracting and granting agencies, the contracting agencies, since they're using a contract from a fairness standpoint, they have a window of opportunity when you can actually talk to the people. So they usually have a pre-solicitation period where you can talk to them and get information. But once they officially release that solicitation, then you can no longer talk directly to the person. The DoD does have a site where you can submit questions. It's called SITIS, but everybody gets to see the questions and the responses or answers they have, just from a fairness standpoint. So the granting agencies, where you could talk to like the NSF or NIH program director right up to the day before the due date. So they do get busy the week or two before, but you could potentially talk to them, the day before or right up to the due dates. So it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the contracting and granting agencies. So using NSF as an example too, NSF used to say under those 30 topic areas that it would say, the program director, if you click on one, it gives you the program director and their email. They don't have the phone number, they have the email. You could find their phone number on the website if you need to, but it used to say, send me a, executive summary or email me executive summary. But NSF, about a year and a half ago, went to requiring a project pitch. So it used to be anybody could submit a full proposal, but now you have to submit this 2 to 3 page project pitch. And then that's reviewed by the program director for whatever topic area you submit under. And then you have to get invited to submit a full proposal. In a way, I like that, because a full proposal is a heavy lift. It's I'll show you the outline in a minute, but it's, it could be 45, 50 pages by your time you're done with it. Whereas this isn't a real heavy lift to do the project pitch to get that feedback. They have 4 boxes where you just fill out online, 500 words for your technology innovation, 500 words for the technical objectives and challenges, 250 words for the market opportunity, and then 250 words for your company and team. So by the time you fill out the 4 boxes, it's about 2 to 3 pages. And a lot of that, you might already have. You can cut and paste some of that in there. And then it used to say on the top that they would get back to you within 3 weeks. Now they changed it to a month. But I've had clients that submit their project pitch in the morning. They get an invite in the afternoon. I've had some the next day. Usually it's within a couple of weeks. As I mentioned, the program directors get busier closer to the due date. So if you can submit it earlier in the submission window, you're probably going to hear back sooner from them. So versus that last week where they're getting all sorts of questions from people, getting ready to submit. So first step, find a topic. Second step is reach out to the program director or topic monitor, whatever you want to call it. Each agency is different, and then just run by them what you're doing, proposing to see, if it's a fit for what they're looking to fund, because you don't want to, waste your time putting together a big proposal if it's not a fit. So here's an example of the outline for a phase 1 proposal. And again, each agency has their own formats, but typically most of them are a 15-page proposal, so actual writing. So in this case, you have a cover sheet and a 1-page project summary. And then the project description, they give you the outline for what goes into the 15 pages. There's a one-page elevator pitch, 2 to 4 pages about the commercial opportunity. So in your project pitch, you only had 250 words to talk about the market opportunity. Now you need to expand that to 2 to 4 pages. Who's the market? What's the size of the market? What's the market segments? How do you plan to go to market? And then you have 1 to 3 pages for the technical solution. So in the pitch, you only had 500 words. Now you need to expand on that. The company and team, you only had 250 words, in the pitch, but now you need a little more detail about who the employees are, who the consultants you have, any advisors you might have. And then the intellectual merits, that's probably the most difficult section, right? That's the R&D plan. That's the who, what, where, and when. What are the tasks you're going to do? What are you going to spend the money on? And then they have a one-page broader impacts. Then you have references, you have resumes or bio sketches. There's a one-page budget, 2 or 3 page budget narrative or budget justification. There's a variety of forms you have to fill out. Supplementary documents. In phase 1, they allow up to 3 letters of support. Phase 2, you can do up to 5. So letters of support are from, for example, potential customers, potential investors, or maybe domain experts or industry experts that can validate what you're doing. And in phase 1, you're still demonstrating feasibility. So they don't have to be letters of commitment. They could be, you could write them for the people and say, should this prove to be feasible, we consider licensing, purchasing, investing in whatever it might be. So that's a typical outline. NIH is a little different. They have a one-page, what they call specific aims, which are for NSF would be your research objectives. And then you have a 6-page research strategy instead of a 15-page. So it's not quite as much writing, where you talk about your innovation and the approach to the R&D and the significance of what you're doing. Just as an example, here's the outline for phase 2. A phase 1 grant, by the time you're doing all the 15 pages and resumes and budgets, you're probably between 40 and 50 pages for a phase 1. Phase 2 grant is actually closer to 100 pages because you have a 15-page technical or project description, plus you have to do now a 15-page commercialization plan. They want to see more detail about how you're going to actually get to market. And so it's a little more detailed at that point in time. So the commercialization plan too usually has 4 sections. There's the market opportunity, your company and team, describing the technology, who the competition is, and then how you're going to finance it, the revenue model. Usually for phase 2, you're going to do maybe a 5-year pro forma or projection, showing your revenues. Early years would come in from phase 1, phase 2, and then you have to start showing other investment or actual revenues coming in. Because a lot of the clients I'm working with are pre-revenue. When they're in phase 1 and phase 2, but once you get to phase 2, then they want to see some sort of money coming in after the 3rd year or 4th year. Just briefly, I mentioned there's the purpose of the program is to commercialize technology. So there are some commercialization assistants. They have what they call TABA, technical and business assistants. And in phase 1, you can get up to $6,500 to subcontract with a entity to help you with putting together a commercialization plan for phase 2. When I had mine, there were 2 companies. One of the big ones called Dawnbreaker. Foresight Technologies was the one I was assigned to, and they gave me a template to use for my phase 2 15-page commercialization plan. So you can choose your own, or you can, some of the agencies have these companies that they've been working with. Agencies also have some specific programs. You see NIH has a couple different ones for commercialization readiness pilot. The I-Corps program, which is through NSF, some of you might be familiar with that, but that's a great way to do some validations of what your hypothesis is, and you go out and interview a bunch of potential customers, doing that customer discovery and using a lean business model canvas to validate what you're doing. NSF will actually fund a abbreviated version of it. They call it Beat the Odds Bootcamp. You can allocate $10,000 in your proposal to participate in that if you haven't already gone through like the NSF I-Corps program. So there's a variety of different commercialization programs that are available. The other thing you have to put together is a budget. So this is government contracting, and you have to divide it into what they call direct costs, or things like material, labor, and travel, anything directly related to doing the R&D project. And then indirect costs, which are your costs for running your business. So that's what would be like fringe benefits, overhead, G&A, and that could, you have to propose a rate if you don't have a federally negotiated indirect rate. Some of the agencies have what they call a safe harbor rate. For example, NSF allows you to propose up to 50% of total direct labor without really justifying it. NIH allows you to do up to 40% of total direct costs. It's their kind of indirect safe rate. But it's important to do that because you can fund, rent, insurance, utilities, accounting costs, your time doing running your business. So you don't want to underestimate that. The other thing you can include is a fee or profit. And most agencies allow you up to 7% phase one. NSF allows you up to 10% phase two. And I suggest taking the maximum amount you can here because this is the most flexible money you're going to get. The direct costs have to be related to just R&D efforts. You can't do any marketing. You can't do any manufacturing. You can't pay for patents. But for the profit, you could go buy yourself a laptop. You could do marketing, or you could go pay for, patent expenses, whatever it is, of that 7% fee or profit. So this is a challenge for a lot of first-time applicants that's trying to structure things properly for their budget. So say you put everything together, then you have to submit it. They all have different online registrations. They have different submission platforms. NIH, USDA use grants.gov. NSF has a proprietary one called research.gov. It's called the FastLane system. DOD has their own. DOE. NASA now has you upload things in the box. So you have to figure out who you have to register with and then how to submit. They all require you to do what's called an SBR Company Registration. That's with the SBA. That's just to track who's getting SBR awards. You have to get an EIN number from the IRS. And then one of the big things you have to do is register with SAM, the System for Award Management. So anytime you're doing government contracting award, that's how they, for example, you put your routing number for your bank. That's how they're going to pay you if you're awarded a grant or a contract. And those can take a while now. They switched from using what's called a DUNS number to a unique entity identifier. And they had some stumbles with that the last few months, but you don't want to wait till the last minute to do those registrations. So when you submit them, then note they're going to review it on. There's some criteria. They're going to get the scientific, technical merit, importance of the problem. What is the technical innovation? Is there a commercial application? Can you build a business around it? Can you scale it into a business? Your team, and then the budget. Does the budget match the work plan, or is there too much work plan, too little budget, or the other way around? So after you submit, some of the common reasons you might be declined, you didn't follow the instructions. The solicitation tells you, 15 pages, 1-inch margins, 11-point types. You want to follow the directions. A lot of times it's not innovative enough. They don't want to fund straightforward engineering or app development. It's got to be some risk and innovation. It's got to be novel. Yeah, the work plan, you want to have a fairly detailed work plan, not just like a one-page work plan. You want to have enough detail, enough technical information, and then, of course, a team that can both carry out the R&D and commercialize it. So you submit, and you want to get, say you were declined, you want to get some feedback. So you can, they'll send you the review panel comments, so you can go through those, and then you can address those and maybe resubmit. Like I was declined the first time around for me, and 6 months later, they wanted to do manufacturing topics again. It was under President Bush at the time. So I took the review panel comments, made some improvements, added a nice new diagram or chart, and I'm successful the second time around. So we have a lot of clients I work with who do resubmit. And if you do get an award, then they're going to ask you to justify things like the budget. Though NSF, for example, wants to see a copy of your lease. You can't be home based now. They want to see that you're operating out of some incubator or accelerator or some space. And then you're justifying your salaries that they're in range with what they call the Bureau labor statistic median for, let's say, the Bay Area or whatever area for a scientist or engineer. Once you get funding too, there's all these other funding opportunities. They have what they call phase 2B funding. A couple of agencies where they'll match a third-party investor. NSF will match up to $1 million, 50 cents on the dollar. So if you get an angel investor who's willing to put up $1 million, they'll give you another $500,000, extend your grant for 2 years. NSF has called a phase 2 CC, which stands for community college. I actually got that. They'll give you additional $40,000 to subcontract with a community college. And I subcontracted with the Napa Valley in their digital design department. So I worked with the faculty and their staff, and they did all my CAD modeling, and they had 3D printers, so they did a lot of my prototyping for me. Each one of the agencies has different opportunities for the different follow-on funding. So in conclusion, there's $3.7 billion out there, and you want to make sure what you're doing is innovative, that is R&D, not just straightforward engineering work or app development. Some of the keys to success is, again, you want to be responsive to that agency's needs. So you want to make sure you're talking to them, making sure that what you're doing is a fit for what they're looking to fund. And you need to show that there is a commercial application for it. There's a market out there, customers that you could build a business around. And then you have enough detailed technical work plan, what you're going to do, and that you have the team that can carry it out. So you want to have a team with their credentials to make it successful. So that is my conclusion. So I'll turn it back over to Colin, I think, to see if we have any questions that we can try to.
Awesome. Chuck, what a great job of just explaining the entire process as somebody who has coached entrepreneurs how to do it, who has done it yourself. Wow, I learned a lot. I was looking forward to this, but this is definitely like me getting my PhD in SBIR, so really appreciate that. Before we jump into Q&A, so keep those questions coming in the Q&A box if you'd like us to get to them. Before we launch to Q&A, I'm going to just put up a quick poll. We're curious on what other topics you'd like to learn from us. So your votes here go into our pile of targets for the next couple of months. So let us know, is it finance, marketing, scale, team, pivot, or just survival? Let us know. Well, these results are looking quite familiar to the topic today, so no surprise there, but looks like finance is at the top of the key. So we've got a bunch of other courses coming up around that. So thank you all for sharing. Chuck, let's just jump right into some of these questions. So there was a couple different questions on the location that you need to be in. So somebody asked if does the program work for people in Long Beach? I'm guessing that's a yes, but there are the requirements in your slide that everyone should probably take a look at about the PI needing to be a US citizen and all the stuff that you talked about, correct?
Yeah, so the PI doesn't have to actually be a U.S. citizen. The ownership does.
Oh.
So you have a PI that's an employee of your company, but they have to be doing the work here in the U.S. So you can't have people overseas doing the work. And then as far as the location, as I mentioned, when I did my NSF phase 1 and phase 2, I was actually home-based, and my team was virtual. I had somebody at Penn State, University of Utah, and University of Oregon. So my team was virtual, and I was using whatever I think the predecessor to Zoom was way back then for all my team meetings. But now NSF requires you to have an actual location. So when you get to that due diligence period, one of the first things they're going to ask you for is your lease. So you need to be prepared to move fairly quickly. And, you can find, this has to be for that 6 months, 12-month period. So you don't want to do a long-term lease. So if you could find an incubator, accelerator, or someplace to, physically operate out of, then that's, so Long Beach is definitely eligible to.
Yeah, there you go. And then for international founders out there, I'm guessing the same similar rules apply, but they can be, I guess the mothership can be in the other country, but they have to have a physical US presence.
I've had some founders that are outside the US, but the company itself has to be a US company that's 51% owned by either a US citizen or permanent resident alien. So you have to make sure the structure of the company is proper. So, but I've had founders that are from outside, but the company itself has to be in the US and primarily.
Awesome. Are there any examples of SBR grants for low tech ideas or tech enabled ideas?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. First of all, it's on examples. It's tough to get examples of successful proposals because, as I showed in the one slide, the agencies have to keep all their information confidential for 20 years. And then like we at Tech Futures Group have to keep our information confidential for our clients. So the number one question I get is, are there sample proposals out there? And some of the agencies like NIH publish like a dozen or so sample phase 1, phase 2s you can go see. Like NSF doesn't have that. I've got a file folder where I can consider model proposals, but I can't just email them out, but I can share like my proposals sometimes to see those. Now, as far as not technical, I guess, and I saw there was a question too about service businesses in the pre-submitted questions, but generally these have to be some sort of technology or technology enabled service so you have to have some sort of innovative aspect to it. So whether it's using AI, machine learning or something to provide a service or whatever it is, but you do have to have a technology component. Each agency has different personality. NSF is very technology focused. They want to see the things are going to be revolutionary, not evolutionary, that are novel, high risk, haven't been done before. Other agencies like USDA are more interested in economic impact. So they have like a small farms topic. So they might not be as focused on the technology. So each agency is a little bit different as far as what they're looking to fund.
Great. There's so many good questions. I hope we can get to them all. Everyone's saying really excellent webinar. So shout out to you, Chuck, for just killing it today. Let's see, we received NSF phase 1 and now applying for phase 2, but we see high level of alignment with NASA. How can we go about this?
Yeah. Well, the agencies, some of them actually coordinate topics like DOE and NSF have similar topics, but NSF has, I've had some clients that have both NSF and NASA. So you can have funding from more than one agency. I've got clients that've got multiple phase 1 awards. Now you can't, what they call double dip. So you can't submit the same proposal to both agencies and get funded for the same thing. You could submit to more than one, but then you have to disclose when you put your application in. They have a current and pending support form, what applications you put in, so they want to make sure you don't have that double dipping. Now, the other thing, I haven't seen this yet, but with the reauthorization 6 years ago, they actually allow you to switch agencies between phase 1 and phase 2. I have not had a client do that, but I guess you could start at NSF and potentially go phase 2 in NASA. But that is allowed actually now. I haven't had a client do that.
Oh, that's great to know. Let's see, another question here. Is there anyone inside SBR program that can assist with formulating the technical plan in our proposal? Since we would hire an expert for some technical details using the funding, we would benefit from an SBR touch point.
Yeah, so I don't know if the question is just asking about someone to help put that together. I mean, you are going to have to pretty much develop the work plan yourself, but there are consultants out there that might be able to help, and we can review the way, since we're funded, we're not through the SBDC, we're not allowed to do the research or work for you, but I can review pieces of it, review the work plan, and provide feedback and suggestions on how to improve it, but you still have to do that work. And there are some consultants out there as well that do that. But yeah, you probably need somebody on your team that has some grant writing experience or technical writing experience. That is a challenge I see. A lot of people are applying, have done other grants at universities and other things, so they have at least some grant writing experience.
Yep. Great. Let's see. How is a fast track proposal different than a 2-step phase 1 and 2? What's the difference as it pertains to acceptance? That's a good question.
Oh yeah. So fast track is specifically for NIH. The reauthorization actually allows people to do what they call direct to phase 2 grants. Some agencies do that, like NIH, DOD, DOE can do direct to phase 2. NSF, you have to go through phase 1 first, then to phase 2. But with the fast track with NIH, what that is, you actually apply for your phase 1 and phase 2 grant at the same time. So you're writing both of them. And the purpose is you want to get rid of that gap of 5 to 6 months between the phase 1 and phase 2. So basically you can complete the phase 1, go straight on to phase 2. Now, I usually suggest don't going the fast track route. We haven't had a whole lot of success for our clients or even direct to phase 2, unless the agency encourages you to do that. They think you've already got enough preliminary data maybe to show that, or directly, if you're doing direct to phase 2, you have to show you've already done the equivalent of a phase 1 project to demonstrate feasibility. So talk to the agency program director. If they encourage you, then maybe that'd be something to pursue. Yeah.
Great. And then I guess, on a similar thread here, if your tech inventions have potential application in multiple sectors, like industrial and medical, is it appropriate to consult topic owners in each area?
Yeah, you could talk to both of them, and you could actually apply for more. Maybe you do one that's in the medical area, then you do another SBIR in the other area that's, that wouldn't be necessarily double dipping. It'd be taking the same technology or platform application and applying it to another area. There's other technical questions you need to answer. You could get funded potentially for both.
Yeah, just different research applications, right?
Yeah. Now, when you are applying, you can only, the agencies, for example, will apply for one at a time. Like NSF used to allow you to do 2 project pitches, and then you could do 2 full proposals, but you had to have a different PI. Now they only allow you to do 1 project pitch and 1 full proposal per submission window. So there's limits by agency of how many you can submit. But you could do to different agencies. You could do 1 NSF and 1 DOE or NIH or something.
Yeah, we had a question here, and I think you just answered it, but could I apply for both SBIR and STTR simultaneously?
Yeah, so the agencies used to do separate solicitations. They even had different topic areas, but they pretty much all have the same topics. So you have to choose whether you're going to do SBIR or STTR. And since you can't do more than one agency, you just choose whether you're going to do the SBIR or STTR route.
But you can apply but you should choose which one you want to apply for. You can't apply for both.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you can apply to any individual agency. I mean, you could do a SBIR NSF and do a STTR NIH, but since NSF allows you only do one submission at a time, you couldn't do both.
Yep. Let's see. As a small business, how did you get staff for the research projects in the beginning?
That's one of the toughest things is building your team, I think. Like I mentioned, the sweet spot is probably, I see the 2, 3, 4 person teams. They've got these founders and they're probably not paying themselves any money yet or anything. But yeah, building a team, I don't have a whole lot of suggestions there. You know, for my case, I started doing the research on large scale freeform fabrication. I came across an article in Australia that referenced the University of Utah. I contacted Dr. Thomas there, said, would you be interested in doing STTR project, the construction industry? He said, yeah, I've been thinking about that. So a lot of it just you going out and contacting, you know, faculty or someone, but yeah, building your team, that's a tough one.
Yep, that's definitely one of the things that keep our community up at night. Let's see. How can you look up how much budget each agency has?
Yeah, well, you can see the budget, like I have the pie chart of their total budget, but you don't really have visibility for subtopics. So within like NSF, they have the 30 topic areas. I don't know of a way to see how much they allocate towards AI versus biotech or anything like that. So some of the topic areas might have more funding than others. You could talk to the program directors, they might give you indication, but usually it's hard to get those numbers. And a lot of it depends on what's politically is important to funding the agencies now too. So that shifts as well. So yeah, there's no easy way to get that dollar amount, but there are different levels of funding for each topic area.
Yeah. Super helpful. Well, we are almost at time and I could spend hours more on this topic and I'm sure you could too. But Chuck, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your wisdom, and your firsthand experience with this very complicated topic today. If somebody was going to dial into the last 2 minutes of this call, what's one takeaway around SBIR funding that you want everyone to take away today?
Yeah, the one takeaway I think would be it's a great source of non-dilutive funding early stage. So you can demonstrate the feasibility of your innovation or technology first. And then when you go to raise money from a VC or angel, you've already reduced the risk. So you don't have to give up as much equity in your company. So if you can get some of this money early on, then that's good for you for not having to give so much equity later on in your company.
Great advice. Well, Chuck, thank you so much on behalf of everyone on our team and everyone in attendance. We really appreciate you, again, sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. And we hope to host you again in the future. For those of you still on the call, we have a bunch of great webinars coming up. So we'd love to hear your feedback on this and others that you'd love to hear. Also, we hope you can join us online for other ones. But in the meantime, Chuck, thank you again. And thank you all for attending. We look forward to seeing you online soon.